in our last video, we started to talk about the English colonies. We know that by the 1730s, there were 13 English colonies covering a narrow strip between the coasts of the Appalachian Mountains. We can see them pictured on the map. The orange colonies are the New England colonies. The purple colored colonies are the middle colonies, and the green colonies are the southern colonies. We learned about how the different regions of the colonies had different strengths to their climate. So we learned that New England had warm summers, but they had a really short growing season because of the long cold winters. The middle colonies have rich soil and are home to lots of deer and beaver that people could use to eat and for fur. And then also we learned about how they were a good region for growing wheat. The southern colonies were the best for farming because the climate was warm all year round, and they had large farms called plantations that thrived there. We learned that there were seaport cities in the New England and in the middle colonies. In our last reading, we learned about how the Puritans came to Massachusetts, and they started to build these settlements, but it was difficult for people who lived there because they didn't allow for people to choose what religion they would like to practice. And we read about a few people who left those colonies because they wanted to practice freedom of religion. Those people were Roger Williams, Hutchinson, and Thomas Hooker wanted people to be allowed to vote, regardless of whether or not they were church members or property owners. Today, let's focus on the middle colonies. The Dutch founded New Netherland in the 1620s. It soon became a thriving trade center where people interacted. Interacted means to talk or work with others. In the 1630s, middle colonies included a Swedish settlement in the New Jersey area. After England's new king, Charles II, came to power, a fleet was sent to capture New Netherland. Governor Peter Stuyvesant surrendered to the English when the colonists refused to fight. Later, the Dutch tried to take back the colony with no success. By 1674, English was in control of the colony. So we learned that this was a Swedish colony, but New England's king was sent a fleet there to take over, and the colonists wouldn't fight, so the Dutch lost control of the colony, and English was in control by 1674. King Charles II gave the colony to his brother, Duke of York, who renamed it New York. The Duke of York gave some land to two friends, and this land became the colony of New Jersey. The Duke of York and his two friends were known as proprietors. A proprietor is someone who owns land or property. Because New York and New Jersey were owned by individuals, they were called property colonies. So that's something to know about this area, is that New York and New Jersey were property colonies. They were owned by individuals. We can see here a colonial home in Philadelphia, what that looks like, and that is the flag for the 13 colonies. New York and New Jersey had diverse populations. That is, there were people from many different countries and backgrounds living there. These people belonged to many different religious groups too. So this area sounds very different from the last one we read about because it is diverse. There are many diverse area, many different religions and backgrounds. The colony of Pennsylvania was founded on religious freedom. The King of England gave the land that became the colony of Pennsylvania to William Penn, a Quaker. Penn founded the colony in 1681. Quakers were against war, said people could pray their own way, and that women could be preachers. Wow, so this sounds very different than our last reading. Here in Pennsylvania, it sounds like people had much more freedom and that women were allowed to have more responsibility in society. Many people disagreed with these beliefs. Quakers thought that all people had an inner light and women could be church leaders. Penn also believed in the rights of American Indians and paying them a fair price for their land. So in this section, we learned about Pennsylvania being founded and how it focused on all people having rights and being fair to others. So think about this question: when and how were the colonies New Jersey and Pennsylvania created? If you have a notebook or a piece of paper, you can pause your camera and try and write that down. You can look back at the text to see how was New Jersey created. I thought that was really interesting here. And then how was Pennsylvania created? You can pause and write that down. Awesome. Now that we've finished reading about the middle colonies, let's move on to the southern colonies. From our last reading, I remember it was very warm here and a great place to grow crops. In the South, the Virginia Company controlled the colony of Virginia. In 1624, the King James I of England took control of the colony. He chose a leader to govern the colony, making Virginia a royal colony. Yet this brought little change as the governing body. The House of Burgesses continued to meet. I annotated that King James I took control of the colony, but the House of Burgesses continued to meet. One big change did occur in the southern colonies in 1632. When Charles I became England's new king, he gave part of Virginia to Lord Baltimore, one of his followers. This new colony was named Maryland. Lord Baltimore belonged to the Catholic Church. Maryland welcomed Catholics who were not accepted in other colonies. So it seems like a lot of the land is being formed by being given from one person to another. Carolina began as a proprietary colony. We know that means it's owned by someone. In 1663, King Charles II gave the land to 8 of his supporters. The colony was split in 1712 and became North Carolina and later 1729. South Carolina became a royal colony. Rich soil made the land good for growing crops. In South Carolina, plantations grew valuable crops, especially rice. They relied on enslaved Africans to farm and act as servants. Charleston, with its fine harbor, became a key trading center. So here we can see how this area developed, and a lot of it was based on plantations that were being worked on by slaves. So the plantation farm owners were making lots of money by using Africans to farm and act as servants. Georgia was founded in 1732. King George II allowed James Oglethorpe to start a colony there for English people who had been sent to jail for debt, which meant they owed money. So Georgia was allowing people who probably weren't allowed somewhere else to be. When he arrived in Georgia, Oglethorpe immediately started a friendship with the Yamacraw chief, Tamochichi. Oglethorpe coordinated good relations between colonists and the Yama crew for many years. It also served a key military role, standing between Spain's Florida colony and the other English colonies. So we can see here that it looks like in Georgia, Oglethorpe worked on relationships between the colonies and had a strong military role. After reading this section and our last reading the other day, I want you to think about, what did you read all about? Pause the video and write down what you read all about. Next, think about, how are the colonies different? How are the colonies the same? You can pause and write down how the colonies are the same and different. Next, let's focus on this question. Based on the text, in what ways did the geography of each colony differ? How did geography influence settlement? On your paper, write down your answer to that question. Awesome. After you wrote down your answer to that question, you're done with this video. So start to think about, which one of those colonies would you have wanted to live in and why? What is your reasoning? What strengths are there to different colonies, and what are the benefits to different people for living there? Thanks for reading with me.